Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. We answer your questions about media every single day, 7 days a week. We broadcast that 6 days a week. If you have a question, you can ask it in Makana. You can vote on things in Makana. You can chat with each other. But if you don't have that, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. You can ask those questions 24/7. So if you're watching this show and you think of a question, you can throw them in. We've got, I think, half the questions this morning so far are coming in from this QR code or from this URL. So go to askofficehours.global, throw your questions in, and we'll answer them as fast as we can. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Jason, what do we have?
Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana would like to know, assuming you already have large 56K light sources, what camera settings do you adjust to make people look more aesthetically pleasing? Also, what are the best methods to warm up the subjects? Offset white balance, add saturation, amber, magenta?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you can see the problem I'm having right now is because at this time of the morning, the sun is coming up through this window that's right there, and it puts this great orange, depending on how much smog is in the air in Los Angeles, puts this great orange glow on the side of my face, and I have to correct with the fill light that's coming from this side, which is set at about 5600. But it's a little too cool to match the warmness, so it gives me a little bit of a warm edge for a while, which looks okay, and it adjusts the balance. It's still overexposed on this side a little bit, but it'll change in just about 10 minutes. So as the direct sunlight that's hitting the window goes off and the skylight comes through, it goes much bluer. A good way, a way we developed, if you have a camera where you can set the your white balance to a number, a lot of times we'll choose 4700, something like that, when lighting with tungsten. Another trick is to get you a little piece of quarter CTB gel, which is color temperature blue. So it's light blue gel that they use in lighting. And if your camera just has auto white balance, let's say, or set the color temperature with a button where it sets it and then it doesn't change it, put the blue filter in front of the lens, hit auto white balance, and then pull it out, and it'll be nice and warm and toasty, and with whatever light source that you have on your object at the time.
Go ahead, Chris.
I haven't seen anybody do that in many, many years, Courtney. I'll tell you, Courtney's problem with the lighting, with the sunlight, is an interesting thing. And when you spend time with really accomplished lighting people, you realize how hard they work to not necessarily light something, but to control the light that's already there. And, I have this beautiful view out my window here that I never see because I have a blackout curtain. And the purpose for that is the attempt is to control the light. During these hours of the day, it would totally change in the 2 hours of this show. Later in the afternoon, some of the sunlight still sort of sneaks in. But Jacob, I think you're on the right track. And I don't know what it is, but I like things lit at 5600 as opposed to, in the old days, we used to light everything in the studio at 3200. And what I do, and I got to tell you, Alex, you got me stuck on this, and I don't know how you walked away from it. Having control of being able to paint the Blackmagic camera from my desk, sitting right here, and open up the color wheels and push and pull, and I couldn't give it up even for the autofocus of your little Sony toy camera there. It's being able to paint it like that. I mean, I used to paint cameras, composite cameras, in the Stone Age, and it was a nightmare. And having full, 3 color wheels and stuff, I feel like I'm in post. It's great. So and then what I do is what I tend to do, and I haven't done it this morning. It looks like I need to. I tend to take on the lift gamma gain. On the lift, I pull the color wheel to the lower left, sort of toward blue. So I would take my shirt would end up have a little less warmness to it because it's a black shirt. And I take the gamma and I push it toward red, and that tends to really kind of wake me up from the zombie look. And then I'll adjust the gain brightness and the gamma brightness. So I'll pull the gamma brightness down a little and I'll push the gain up. And I'm going to do that over the next couple of minutes. So if you see me on camera next time, I'll look a little different.
There's a couple different ways to attack the kind of doing the color. The most common one is to warm up the white balance just a little bit. So going to a 57 to 5900. Most of us have a lot of 56K lights. And the reason we use 56K, 32K is known as kind of like, oh, that's better for skin or that's better for other things like that. The problem really is that as we build up our lighting rigs, it's easier to change the color of all the bulbs in the building than it is to change the color of the sun. So we as a result, we've tried the whole sun thing, and you can do CT, you can do you can gel all the windows and everything else. But if you've ever gelled especially in older buildings, windows with little squares, that are all over the thing, you're like, hey, let's go to 5600. So a lot of us, from a practical perspective, work at 5600 a lot. And then what we do is we oftentimes will, if the color temperature if your camera is set to a higher color temperature than your lighting is, it will look a little warmer. It has a certain warm feel, and some people don't like it. They feel like it looks a little artificial. So you got to be kind of careful of that. But in film, we change that all the time. And then the other direction that we go is that if it goes, obviously, if you want it to look cooler, you'll go below that number. So increasing that number works to some degree. Oftentimes, you're going to, if you're doing it in post, of course, your colorist is going to do a lot of things to it to get it to where they wanted to put it. So you're just trying to, I'm assuming that what you're doing is something for live. And so for live, we would typically not play with the saturation and magenta and so on and so forth, because it makes it really hard to match all the cameras. And so it's much easier for us to get all the cameras matched and then move their color balance if we need to, if we want to warm it up a little bit. And that's been the most common way for us to do that. But it is, being able to paint cameras, whether it's on the Blackmagic, as Chris said, or almost any professional setup that we have for a live event, whether it's, for any of the cameras that we use, we typically can paint them, or we're not using them in a live environment. So that's the, now when you don't have cameras that can be shaded easily from a live environment, we use things like, you can actually build shading into like an FSHDR and so on and so forth, which we've used in some cases. But so those are a couple different ways that we kind of approach those problems. But that is the single way to do that. The other thing you can do is also cool off the background. So by using lighting, if you cool off the background, it'll make the person look a little warm, unless you're trying to make the whole thing look warm. But one of the things that I really do like to do is look at scenes of movies and really capture the frames out of them, however you capture frames, and look at them and take them into scopes and look at what they look like in scopes. So something that's warm and lustrous on a film, in a film, look at where the color actually is. And you'll find that there's a lot of manipulation of that color. It's very rarely completely accurate. That's the nature of film. So I would highly recommend playing with that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, many neurodivergent people and those with intellectual disabilities receive significant assistance from parents and caregivers. Could a carefully trained LLM or similar Gen AI tool help ease the transition to independence for said population?
Yeah, I think it's going to. I think AI is going to be a huge benefit. I think a variety of folks with a variety of disabilities are going to have a big benefit from AI and automation as we move forward, in the sense that there's a lot of support that they can get that we simply can't provide in any other way. I don't think it's going to replace humans anytime soon, but I think it could make things somewhat easier. Next question.
Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina writes in, what's the brand and model of the electronic coax stripper that the group uses?
It is a Coastal Tools. Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly here. But it's let's see here. Sorry for the. I missed this one somehow. Coastal Tools. You can hear me typing away quickly. Coastal Cable Tools is actually the company that you're looking for. Or this is the one that at least that I've talked about. I don't know if the whole group uses it, but this is the one that. Let me pull this over so I can show it to you. This is the one that I have. Let's see if we can pull this up. So this is the handheld wire strippers. There's also ones that are not handheld. You can get one. So basically, it has this power pack. You can get one with a battery, and this one has a foot pedal on it. And so you can so there's a variety of different ways of kind of managing it. This is what I've used in the past, and it is. I have to admit, I feel a little. I feel like I have a deficiency in my ability to strip SDI cables or BNC cables any other way, because this is how I learned how to use it. I never learned how to use the little thumb thing, and I try and I damage the cable, and I try to, and I just there's a lot of. I use a lot of words we can't use on the show, and I cut the cables, and I damage the things, and I'm just like, I'm never doing this again. So I don't know how to do it any other way other than with the Coastal cable tools, and I feel like I should. It's kind of like we're going to talk about some old school ways of pulling keys in the second hour, and I feel like it's us showing you some basic skills that you might need, but I don't have the skill to do it by hand. I need this to actually do cables. Go ahead, Chris. I'm embarrassed to say it too. I'm embarrassed.
No,
I'm
you
not
shouldn't be
bragging
embarrassed.
here.
It's okay. But I can tell you exactly what you're doing wrong with the other stripper. Don't use your thumb. That's the problem.
I use the finger. I use my finger, my finger. But that's true. That's probably a bad idea. That's why it's been screwed up the whole time. Now I use my
now you can look at all that money you could have saved.
But I don't know how to do it any other way. I've had this for so long, and I think I've used one of these Coastal cable strippers for maybe 15 years. And so as a result, if you do it for 15 years and then I never did it before. I ordered cables, like I ordered SDI cables, and having this and plus understanding how to do it, then I stopped buying cables. Like I don't know when the last time we bought SDI cables. Like we just buy rolls of SDI or rolls of BNC and we just terminate everything. I don't know. Next question.
Paul Wall, who's in Austin, Texas, writes in.
We're getting ahead. Somehow our questions got ahead there. Hold on, let me pull this back. Hold on, we got jammed up here. Hold on, cancel that. Go there. Let's try that again.
All right, next question. Paul Walhus writes in, Logitech just introduced the Mix line, which does some pretty slick-looking audio routing. What do you think? Do you think it'll catch on? And then he includes the link.
Nigel?
So I think if you're a PC user, yes. If you're a Mac user, no, because it doesn't run on the Mac. This feels to me like Logitech is trying to double down on its gaming and its Twitch and all of that stuff. So it's starting to provide tools that we've had with Rogue Amoeba, we've had with SoundDesk on Macs for a while, and is really designed to sort of fill some of those gaps in for the PC world if you don't want to use any of those fruit-based mixing tools.
Courtney?
Yeah, Nigel covered it. I haven't had a chance to try it yet, being the Windows guy here, one of the Windows guys here. It looks very much like Rogue Amoeba's loopback and hijack, where it gives you a nodal-based routing and mixing, and I think it also then lets you create virtual sound devices, which then will show up in any of your audio applications as a source, as an audio source, so you can then use it to add to a mix or to record or to stream. So that's what it says, drag, mix, stream. I think it lets you connect things very similar to how you do in hijack and loopback on the Mac world, but without being a potato or banana.
Yeah, I do think that the obsession with fruits and vegetables is going to really be hard for the potatoes and the pineapples and the things like that, because again, I just find that like I can't like I know that programmers can have this thing like they'd like to be funny, but I don't know if I'd name a product that I thought was funny, and I think that I'm having a hard time with that one. I think Logitech may eat their lunch, eat their veggies, and go ahead, Chris.
People often pick a theme to start naming things.
I just don't think that was a good theme. Trying to recommend a potato to a client is really hard. That's all.
So what I was going to say is, I think it's interesting that they really latched on to the loopback user interface. I mean, it's kind of testament.
Well, I would say that they latched on to nodal interfaces, which is the way to do everything. About an
audio thing.
I know, but there's other audio things that do. There's a lot of audio things that do.
Okay, fine.
I'm just saying that
You win this one.
Rogue Amoeba didn't win this one, but
You win this one.
But I'll be back.
I will with a vengeance. I got to read ahead. I'll be
too. I think that nodal interfaces are. I wish I could have a whole mixer that was a nodal interface. I mean, and there are. I know every time I say that, they're like, "Hey, the BSS 806 has a nodal interface, and this hasn't." But what we really need is a real nodal interface as a mixer that we could build in. And so, Rogue Amoeba does Loopback does a very constrained version of that. And so this one's a bit constrained too because it's nodal based in columns. What you really want is, where they could go with this and where I wish a Rogue Amoeba would go. And they do this, Rogue Amoeba does this with Audio Hijack a fair bit, which is you kind of have these nodes. I will admit that the nodes, and for whatever reason, the nodes in Audio Hijack make me a little crazy as a person who's used a lot of nodal interfaces that I can't take them seriously for some reason. I don't know exactly what it is about it, but I can't take the processor seriously. I think that they did well here. They are missing that third column, which does make a difference. So being able to create the device and then be able to have the outputs are two different things that Rogue Amoeba does in Loopback that they're not doing here, at least from the screen grabs. They're only creating the devices, and that is actually, they're missing 1/3 of the solution, in my opinion.
You know what I find interesting in the Rogue Amoeba world? That Loopback, once you set it up, you can close the app and it still does its thing. And Audio Hijack, you got to boot it up every morning. It's got to be, it's not like a persistent
right
behavior that's happening in the background. And I wish you could take a patch and say, just make this thing happen all the time instead of having to start it.
Yeah. Go, Courtney.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed from the interface, and which maybe there's a setting for that, because I don't know, I haven't tried it, but if it could color the node links, would make it a lot simpler. When you get, Chris is shaking his head, so that you have, like the stuff coming from this application is that audio links are colored one color, and the things coming from another application, so you can, when they get all tangled up in the middle there, because you're routing things up and down and around and in circles and back, it would help your eyeball keep them all straight.
Don't get me wrong, Courtney. I agree with you. I'm just shaking my head like, yeah, it doesn't do that. It would be cool.
Next question.
Zach Stahlsmith in Chautauqua, New York, writes in, are Udemy certifications generally considered to be a valid barometer of knowledge about hardware and software across the industry?
Go ahead, Jason.
Okay. I've never hired or not hired someone on the basis of a certificate or a certification. In the same way that, if you're doing it right, the last thing you should know is you shouldn't hire people on the basis of certificates, period. So, I'll leave it at that.
In the entertainment industry, I don't know of, there's a handful of schools that if you go to, people will be like, oh, that would be, there's a handful of, if you went to USC or you went to NYU or you went to, something else like that, you might get a door in, and mostly what you'll get is introductions. So the alumni from those schools will talk to you and give you a shot as a PA, and that kind of thing, to get into those things because you at least went to those schools to get through those things. I don't really know anybody that hires like Jason said, in our industry, I don't know anybody that hires on the basis of certificates. It's all like, hey, do you know somebody that can do blah, 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 blah. And there have been definitely partnerships between schools. I think that, but I think that if, in the entertainment area, there's not a lot of connection between certificates. I'm not saying in any area. If you're an architect or an engineer or a medical doctor or an optometrist, I'd really like to see some kind of degree, like that you did something that represents, because and here's what those certificates represent is a fairly structured, orderly, and many-year program that is grueling, and even then they make a lot of mistakes, and have a lot of things that are there. But I think that someone just I wouldn't want someone to say I'm a doctor and then just start treating people. So I think that there is but I think in our industry, I mean, I think part of it is that the industry is moving so quickly. It doesn't, those certifications don't really matter. I think Udemy, I think it's Udemy because I think it's Udemy. Anyway, I think that they have a lot of great programs, and if you get them on sale, they're really cheap. It's like $10 or $20. Never buy those things on retail. If you go to Udemy, you want to wait until they do their sale, and then you'll buy everything for $10 each. And there's a lot of great videos in there, and there's a lot of things you can learn. I would spend a lot less time worried about certificates and mostly, pieces of paper, and more time on actually generating those skills and getting practice. And as you get that practice, as you work with other people, as you volunteer on programs and projects and everything else and pick it up, you're gonna grind your way towards understanding how to actually do this. And I think that there's a great documentary that Mickey turned me on to called "What Drives Us," and it's hard to watch. Oh, no, it's free on YouTube right now. I noticed it keeps on showing up on my YouTube thing. Somebody posted it on YouTube, and you should just watch it while it's still there. But it's called What Drives Us, and it's a David Grohl documentary. But I had to pay for a subscription to Coda that was inside of Amazon to watch the thing, which I did just to watch this because I love music documentaries. But what they talked about was really the value of touring. And the fact that, get in a little van. These are early touring, not the late touring, but like you're all in a van. Like even Dave Grohl talked about the fact that took the band out and they just went from, in a little van, even though he had been in Nirvana, he had the money. There was something bonding about, going out and loading in and doing all the things that needed to be done to be part of that, to grow it. And he, I think members of his band and he were like, I don't know if we'd be still around as a band if we hadn't done that. And so I think that there's something about that grueling, like in the trenches experience that you have with people that you have to get, as well as, some of the knowledge, and combining those two things is really important. But 99% of the folks that I know get hired because someone recommended them, that's how this gets done. And the pieces of paper, if you're applying for a corporate job, those pieces of paper seem to matter to them because they sort pretty obtusely. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say that the thing about certificates to me, and this is just to me, it tells me you're good at taking a test. And maybe you could regurgitate a bunch of information at the time that you took the test, but whether or not it's practical or it's ingrained or it's going to gurgle to the top in a moment where you absolutely need to know something, that's something that you only learn from somebody by watching them. Like Alex is saying, you're going to hire people based on who they know, introductions you make. But unfortunately, we live in a world where, like Alex said, a lot of hiring practices that it's all done like automatically. It's going to look for this and this and this, and if you fulfill those things, then we'll let you possibly talk to a human. I don't know that I could make a living if I was starting today. It would be really hard, and it's frightening, actually.
It's again, I think that one of the things though is that when a lot of us got started, number one is there were a lot less people that could do it, so we had a lot less competition. Number two is we did spend. I don't know, Chris, maybe you jumped in and you were getting paid a lot of money from day one, but I was not. I was making $350 an hour doing Photoshop, in the early 90s. And I felt, the only reason I could pay the rent was because I was a DJ. I DJ'd weddings, on the weekends, and I'd make enough money to pay the bills with my DJ money and my money that I made doing Photoshop all week, 40 hours a week, was just funny money. Like it was like it let me buy books at Tattered Cover in Denver, but that was it. So I think that and I lived in pretty much in basements until I worked at Lucasfilm. Like just putting all my time into figuring out how to do this. But there was a solid 8 years of grinding through making just enough money. I mean, I did not make much money. Like I got tax credits. Like, so that you're not making much money when you're getting tax credits back. Like I would be like, they're giving me money back. Like I was like, I didn't even understand like how I got a check back for nothing. Like I was just like, okay, and so it was like a bonus from the government. I didn't even understand how tax credits work, but that's how little I made while and I went from that to working at the ranch. There was a little bit of glitch in between where I suddenly asked for a lot of money and suddenly had a bunch of money. And then I immediately moved to Lucasfilm. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Well, and even keep in mind, my main source of income is as a technologist. I don't primarily work in production. I love it. It's a hobby of mine, but I don't think I've ever been hired even for the corporate work on the basis of like my college degrees, for example, maybe as an expert witness, but like, this really is going away. Experience is the best teacher, and really don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, Chris makes a good point, though, about modern job applications, which is if you are responding to a job posting that asks for certain qualifications, if you don't have those qualifications in your resume, then the AI tools will delete you before the person sees it. And that's just the way those things work. If, however, you're not responding, then I always tell people as you're building a career, think about three things: content, approach, and network. Content is what you know. Approach is how you use what you know. And network is who knows that you know how to use what you know. So I think the Udemy and other skills like that are great to get you the content. But unless you can demonstrate that you can use it and people know that, then it's no use to you.
And again, like the way that I've mostly done things in the past is just try to start working on things. You just start working on what you're interested in doing, and you meet a bunch of people and you work on those things and you get to know folks. And most of the businesses that I've been in started with like live streaming. We just started doing live streaming because I thought that it would be a big deal. And we didn't make any money on live streaming in Pixelcore. We didn't make any money doing live. We were doing it for Pixelcore. We were doing it for anybody who asked. Like, because I was like, I'm going to do the biggest live streams, blah, 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 blah. And because I just got hooked on it and realized this was a great way to connect people. But we probably did it for 2 years. 2 years of just, and the first ones were horrible. Like they were like little 320 by 240 Ustream streams. And we were, and half of them failed. Like half of them failed in some way. We lost bandwidth. We lost a camera. The computer crashed. And they were horrible. They were like, we have a camera in a crowd, and we're trying to figure this out. And like it was all, and then it was one of those things that we talked to a client, and we were already shooting video for them for something else, and they let us try to stream this thing. And someone saw it and said, "Oh, we should do a lot of that." And then that was it. And then the next 10 years was just thousands of streams that we were getting paid for. They got bigger and bigger and bigger. But I think that one of the things that in our current society, we get impatient and think that, oh, this is going to have to happen tomorrow. Like I'm going to do this thing, or I'm going to get a degree, and now I'm going to be able to get the job or whatever. And I think that, my thing is always trying to figure out how do we start teaching high school students? What I really think we should be doing is teaching high school students and even grade school students how to do media production, so that they have all that time, to learn how to do this, as opposed to trying to do it when they have to make money. I think that's the hardest part. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, for the record, I did live in a basement once. I lived in a shed in the backyard of a house. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 guys. I paid my dues.
Exactly. Next question.
Chris Widener in Indianapolis, Indiana writes in, for cloud production, what dedicated server hosting have people tried besides AWS, Azure, and Google? I'm trying to pin down a dedicated server provider to try to keep cloud costs fixed.
Silence. The hard part is that cloud is hard. To do something in the cloud is hard. It takes enormous infrastructure to pull it off. And it's those three. I don't know if you can fiddle with other things, but those are the ones that are, there's definitely specialties, but I'll tell you that if you're working with someone else doing cloud, there's a high probability you're just paying them a premium so that they are going to AWS, Azure, or Google. Like most cloud services sit on one of those and make that work. Like you go to Restream, like, hey, I'm going to use Restream. And what Restream is it's an interface for AWS. It's not, that's what they do. Okay, Chris.
I think the thing about all of this stuff is you have to have that dependability. And so why go to, second best, third best, fourth best? We had a client, we just had a meeting the other day. One of our clients has decided that they want to bring all of their streaming in-house, and this is about a 7-year cycle. I've watched this happen many times over the last 4 decades of companies that want to bring something in-house, and then they try it, and then they see it's hard. And usually after somebody gets fired and eventually 6-7 years later, they get comfortable with bringing in the contractors again. I've seen it happen many times. And this company thinks that they want to bring their virtual productions in-house. Like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah, I mean,
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to your point. I was talking to someone about that, about in-house versus, and there's some advantages if you're doing the same thing every single day and you just want to have basic folks there to do it. There's an argument for having someone in-house that you just have a handful of people. The problem is that anytime you do something outside of that little sandbox, what you want is a team that is custom built for what you need with people who have done a lot of it. And one of the big advantages of hiring a freelancer to do those things is that they work with lots of other companies. Like when you bring me in, you're bringing in the skill set of 200 plus design agencies and social agencies that I've worked with. I've been in all those meetings and I've had all those discussions and I've learned from all of them and all the production companies that I've worked with and all the other things that I've worked with and all those other, and so you're bringing people in that have a lot of, these kind of Ronin that kind of wander around and solve all these problems for you. And they have a much deeper, whereas oftentimes in corporate, it doesn't take very long in corporate to kind of get out of touch, and not
Very
be able
quickly.
to, because you get into like, well, this is the way we do it. And there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of new things coming in, and then you're kind of, you're just kind of concrete. Now it helps to have some people in-house that can do some of those things, but it is something that is, it's pretty dangerous. And that's why most companies, like, especially for big events, they're hiring all out, like a Dreamforce. There's like a handful of people inside of Salesforce that manage the core communications, and then it's all external companies. That this is what and the key is Dreamforce gets done once a year for Salesforce. So if they had a full-time team, they, what are they going to do? I mean, how are they going to learn? The teams that they're hiring do this every week. Do this every week or every couple of days, and so they're up to whatever's going on. And so those are the things that are hard. I know we've kind of gotten off the beaten path here for this question, but
Yeah, sorry about that.
yeah, but yeah, something to think about there. Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, Peter Joy in Guernsey, Channel Islands, UK. In a recent webcast using Vimeo 1080 at 30, I had reports of connectivity issues within the same offices. They told me that they have no problems with Zoom and Teams. Do they use multicast if being received in the same office on a corporate LAN?
It could be. I mean, they could be using some. There's a variety of it's. It depending on what you call it. I can't remember what Zoom calls theirs, and I don't know what Teams calls theirs, but there is a lot of different ways to distribute a video signal to a lot of people watching from, within the same building. But it is something to pay attention to. You can't just stream to a building of 1,000 people. So those are, so that's the challenge that you have. I don't know. I can't believe that Vimeo, that hasn't solved this problem, because they're so good at corporate. And I just haven't had a time to look at that. But I think that there are a variety of tools. There's a company called was called Collective. I'm not sure what they're now, but they were Contiki and then Collective. There's another company called Hive. There's another company called Facebook Workplace did it or does it. There is, and I believe Zoom has a solution for this for streaming. So maybe what they're doing inside of Zoom to make that actually happen. And also Zoom flexes pretty well when it's getting. And Zoom, by the way, this is one of the reasons that I believe that Zoom doesn't do 1080p out of the gate for everybody. You have to ask for it, is because you may not want to do that. So anyway, so I think that in larger enterprises, you can set those servers up to do that. So those are but what they are is peer-to-peer. It goes in 1 to 5 times into the building, and then it's sending those out. And it can be multicast or it can be peer-to-peer. I believe Contiki is a peer-to-peer solution where it keeps on passing those bits between the different computers to do it. And then there's also multicast. And so those are things to consider. But yeah, you want to look into those solutions if you're going to be streaming to companies with very large numbers of people in the offices. You just have to take, and the problem is you really have to work with their IT department. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to stream this. You have to talk to their IT department if you're going to use any of the tools that allow it to go into a building and stream. The IT department has to generally open up some stuff to make that possible. So definitely do some research on that area. Yeah, but I'm surprised. I am kind of blown away again that Vimeo hasn't solved that, because I think that Vimeo largely focuses on corporate communications to customers, which then doesn't have to worry about that. It's when you're dealing with corporate communications to their own employees that becomes more complicated. Next question.
Paul Wahus in Austin, Texas writes in, on my Synology NAS, I want to rebuild my volumes to a 70-30 split 16 terabyte storage, 24 for remote backup. Do I have to wipe what I have stored already to do this and start from scratch, or can I preserve my existing data? I have the default standard now. I'll answer that if no one else wants to jump in.
I was going to say, you're going to have to rebuild it. Like if you're rebuilding the partitions, you're going to have to take everything off of it and put it back together. I don't know if you
it's the long and the short of it. But unless you have a really big Synology NAS, it's a terrible idea to try to do anything at all with like splitting. There's no really great reason to need to split.
Next question.
Scott Pulsifer in Philadelphia writes in, trying to record a remote guest interview to make it look better than a standard Zoom call. They don't have an ATEM. They operate on a PC. How would you do this? Thanks.
Nigel?
Well, I think first of all, you're going to make sure they've got enough light and they've got a good mic and they've got a PC camera that's good enough. Then the question is, are you getting a good enough feed from them? I would tell you there are two things that I tend to use Riverside is. One, I also use Ecamm and the interviewer mode on that. And the real question is whether you're trying to do a live production or whether you're just trying to capture their video. Riverside is probably the best way if they have a good enough camera on that PC to capture the best quality video and then edit it later.
Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Blacksburg, Virginia writes in, if you have refreshed Mukana, there's a new way you can enter your country in Mukana. Have you found it yet? It's under settings and profile. Go in there right now.
Yeah, so go to settings and profile. I don't think I have a way to show that really quickly without showing more than I want to. So but go into your settings and you should be able to put your country profile in, and we've been updating that so that people get the right flags. So we'd love to have the right flags for when you're asking questions. So go ahead into settings and profile in Mukana, and you should be able to give us a country code and let us know how that works for you. Next question.
Chris Widener in Indianapolis, Indiana writes in, Cloudflare as a CDM seems interesting when doing video hosting for clients who want to monetize their productions, and Vimeo is out for one reason or another. Are they any good PPV VOD producers or providers for small businesses and nonprofits?
I can definitely tell you Cloudflare is very popular. In those areas. I don't know of any other provider that's being used. There may be other ones that are being used, but that is definitely by far the most popular one, and one that we use inside of both, for a lot of different aspects of what we do. So I would highly recommend it. Next question.
Gil Carter in Brisbane, Australia writes in, is there a direct method to get live Keynote graphics output through a Blackmagic Ultra Studio for the key and fill into the switcher? Rendering to ProRes 4444 and then playback from a hyperdeck seems like a bit clumsy. Is there a better way? And that's coming in from the QR code.
Oh, we really wish that was possible, but no. There's no way to do that. The way that anybody who's using Keynote in a live environment, and many of us started that way. So like you don't usually use it for very long that way, but we have started. And what's great about Keynote is there's so many things that are pre-built. So you can kind of just throw in, I just want the text to go flying over this way, and I want this all to type in. And so for someone who doesn't have a lot of, if you're handing it off to someone without not a lot of technical skill or a lot of time, when we first started, I talked about starting in live. When we first started doing live, all of our lower thirds and all of our graphics were coming out of Keynote, and we would set them all carefully up. And we'd be in the producer view or whatever, and we could select any name that we were looking for and have it pop out. And so what was nice is that you could build those really fast. You could just build like all the lower thirds, and it was super fast. And this is and at the time I was really good at After Effects. I mean, I could definitely do that. I didn't have the money to buy a Chiron, which at the time was pretty much the only option. So that we were doing, and so that was to solve that. What we did is we mostly did Lumikeen. And so we would do it over top of pure black and just make sure that none of our blacks were darker than 15%. And then we would, and then your edges are a little harder so that you can, and it'll key it right out. And by the way, Lumikeen is what broadcast used for a very long time. So there's a solid 20, 30 years of using Lumikeen. And even when for, into the like 2015 or so, if I went to an event TD and said I wanted to send them key fill, they were like, hey, just send it over black. They were like, this is how they, just make that work. You can do over green screen, but the problem is you'll get aliasing along the curved edges because it's a 422 key. So you're going to see aliasing along curved edges, aliasing along long edges or like angled edges because it's, so green is not, Lumikey will look better than a green screen over top of it. And so those are the ways to do that. And what you want is not really a key fill output. I mean, you do want that, but the easier thing for Apple to produce would be an HTML5 page. So if Keynote could generate an HTML5 page with an alpha channel, it could just simply push the whole thing to it, and that would be, and then you could load that. That would be a big deal.
Oh my God, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I was trying to think about. I was trying to think about how you would, what's the easiest, not what's the best way, but what's the easiest way for Apple to execute to make this possible. And it would just be, do an HTML5 page that would do it. And theoretically, that HTML5 page could be delivered to someone over the web so that they could just.
I'm going to the comments section right now, and I'm going to do that. Let's all do that. Please, Apple, generate HTML5 out of Keynote.
Yep. And in reality, there are many, as Mickey's mentioning there are many other. This is not a broadcast graphics thing, but again, if you don't have the money and you don't have the skill set, it is a solid way to put things together if you don't have other options there. So anyway, I think that, and a lot of us got started that way. I wouldn't use Keynote in broadcast now. The big problem I have is that it drops frames if you're not careful. And so on those playbacks when it's doing an external monitor, and which you don't notice when you're doing the presentation, but you do notice when you are in broadcast. Next question.
Francis Frey in Cambridge, Massachusetts writes in, I have tried to get the Ultra Studio 3G to work as a capture card, but no luck. I've installed the desktop video software, changed the security settings, yet I still get the dreaded no desktop video device detected alert. Any advice welcome, and this is the QR code.
Yeah, so the 3G and the question is, so one question for you is, are you trying to go through any adapter? I'm going to assume that you're not. So if there's a Thunderbolt connection to that, and also look at your cable. So if you're using a USB-C cable to the 3G recorder, I don't think it'll work. So you have to use a Thunderbolt cable to go into that's the number one thing that gets you with Blackmagic stuff. If you'll see a little lightning bolt on that 3G cable, it has to have a Thunderbolt cable or it will not see it. I am going to guess that that's your problem. So that it's the cable there that's not a Thunderbolt, and I believe it's 3 or 4, or is it only 4? It's only a 3 or 4 Thunderbolt. If you're going through a Thunderbolt adapter, no way to make that work. Then just letting you know that there are Thunderbolt adapters out there that none of them are going to work. And USB. So that's the number one problem we see with connecting a recorder. And if assuming that you've already installed, I think you did say you installed the desktop video software, you shouldn't have any problem with it. So that's my guess is what the problem you're having. Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York writes in, morning, everyone. What are the panel's thoughts on the new Ecamm Live 4.2 update?
Go ahead, Nigel.
A big Ecamm fan. There's a whole bunch of stuff in 4.2. Obviously, it's a dot release, so it's not a huge version change. You'll see there's support for the Apple Virtual Camera and the ability to get those lovely thumbs up and things going if you want off your Stream Deck. There's a vertical safe zone, which allows you, if you're doing a recording or broadcast vertical stuff, to have a safe zone to work in. There's all sorts of other features, editing with scenery if you use that, Instagram support. There's a lot of little stuff. Again, Ecamm is a great tool if you're a one-man band who's broadcasting and mixing and editing and doing it all in real time on your own. And it's probably the cheapest way and probably half the price of a Mimo Life, but not nearly as flexible. But if you want a very simple, easy to use sort of one-man band tool, it's great. And their betas are always super stable.
Next question.
Matt Halverson in Brookings, South Dakota writes in, I was trying to display a JPEG on a 2014 Samsung TV from a flash drive and had trouble getting the space correct with my picture. After a deep dive, I found out I needed to change my .jpg to baseline instead of progressive. Is this a common problem?
Yeah, progressive is designed to, if I'm correct, it's designed to load it before it's completely there. So that it'll go from top to bottom, but that can be harder to read. So if and this gets welcome to using your TV. My TV has an HDMI input, and that's what I use. The HDMI input. The TV is it is a pile of pixels with a it's a pile of pixels that has an HDMI inputs into it. Using anything inside the TV is crazy. Next question.
Scott Wasserman in Detroit, Michigan writes in, I vaguely remember a few years ago there was an app or website that allowed for spinning up test Zoom participants to test and stress test a meeting. Am I imagining this? Is this a thing?
We had that for a while, and we're working on putting it back up again. So we just have a lot of fires right now. It's one of the fires that we're trying to put out is to have a high-density solution for that, and we're pretty close. But we just, we're working on it. Next question.
Tim Snyder in Louisville, Kentucky writes in, has anyone noticed that the Resolve vector scope is quite different from the new Omniscope? When placing colors from the Chromadomon chart in boxes, it seems oversaturated. When placing the colors in the boxes in the Nobe, the colors seem correct.
The Nobe Omniscope is going to be more correct than Resolve. That's my prediction. Now, when you're looking through it with Resolve, just make sure that your transfer functions are set correctly. So you could be setting the transfer functions differently than what Nobe is looking at directly. So that'd be the only thing that I could think of that would change that. But if I was going to pick one that I trusted, I would trust Omniscope. They are working pretty heavily with a lot of larger companies to make sure that they're correct. Next question.
Paul Walhoofs in Austin, Texas writes in, do you take notes while you're on office hours? What do you use, pencil and paper or an app? Also, producers, please comment in Mukana, and if an app, which one?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't take notes, but what I did discover recently is there's a new experimental app from Google called Notebook LM, and it uses AI. It's available now. You can sign up for it, and what it lets you do is create notebooks, and then it uses an LM engine to coordinate and allow you to search. Here, I'll load a sample one here on light bulbs. So you enter your stuff. You just type in notes, and you can bring in documents. You can bring in PDFs, Google Docs, and or cut and paste into the notes area. And then you can establish several notebooks, and then you have basically a chatbot interface then to just your notes, and it exists only on your machine. So it is not using any data that is coming from the outside world, so it's less likely to hallucinate or give you false information. And so this can be handy. The only I tried using it the other day, and the only thing I found problematic in it is that it lets you add documents to your own notebook, but only one at a time. I had a situation where I wanted to, for example, load in all my invoices from the last 30 years that have, the company name and what was done and where it was done and so on. And I wanted to be able to search that collection of PDFs, which are PDFs, to find out, every invoice I did for this company at this location, So that would be a good application of something like that. But it doesn't. I don't think it allows me to enter, a folder full of invoices. It only allows you to input one PDF at a time, and I have thousands. So
Go ahead, Chris.
that might be a problem.
I live in a world that's almost completely void of paper. Like I usually I can't even find a pen when I'm looking for one. I type everything. And I used to actually take a ton of notes during office hours. I just open up a text document and type like crazy. I dated at the beginning of every day, and quite often I would refer back to it. I don't do it as much anymore. Maybe that's hubris. I think I know everything. I don't know what that is. But in terms of like notes, like my favorite app on my iPhone is the little, what do they call it? Notepad or Notes or Notey Notes or Notes.
Notes from Apple, yeah.
Yeah, it's mind-bending. It is absolutely my favorite thing. My wife always loves it when I go to the restaurant for takeout, and I always bring her exactly what she wants because I wrote it down last time.
Same here.
Do you ever share notes with your wife?
No, she'd realize I'm writing everything down.
No. So I share a note that says shopping list when I say I'm going to and then the whole family can sit there and just keep typing things in.
How do you do that? I can't figure out how to do that.
Use the share sheet.
It's a share. Yeah, it's in share. It's in you create one and then you put a couple things in it and make it a checklist or whatever, and then there's a share. I'm not going to show my note. I'm going to open my notes.
That's
and we're going to have to do an edit. But if you, let me see if I can do it off.
It's
screen.
the box with the arrow.
Yeah,
no, I know the box with the arrow. So
and then you share it with them. It
up,
has to be to their Mac. They have to be Apple user. They have to, it's to their Mac address. If someone has something else, it's no fun. There's no good way to share stuff on an Apple product with someone who's not in an Apple product. It's not.
Let me tell you something else that you may not have heard. So, hopefully this comes to Notes, but if you make a shopping list in Notes, it's very cool. You can even make the little checkboxes. If you make a shopping list in Reminders, it breaks it down for you.
Yeah, it sorts
what section of this grocery store you're going to have to look for that thing automatically. That's pretty cool.
Wait, in
produce, you're going to look for corn and asparagus and this, but in the bread section, you're going to look for hot dog buns. And
what does that?
Reminders. If you make a reminders list, it will auto sort by section.
It just automatically breaks the grocery store down into sections.
What I will say is that if you're using a PC, there's a lot of options. If you're using a Mac, there's Notes. If you need to be cross-platform, you can use. I'm sure that you can find something else. But for those of us that are deep in the Apple thing, we just use Notes, and I've experimented with almost everything else, and I've now just use Notes, and I've stopped looking. There is a really big team at Apple that keeps making it better. Just so you know, it's not, Notes is not seen as a side project for Apple. It is a core. It is a core company project, and so there's
PDF
a lot
scanner.
of tools. Yeah, PDF scanner, and you can take notes and point it at anything, and it'll tell you what it is. Like, what plant is this? And you point it at Notes, and it pops open and goes, oh, this is this. Oh, yeah. All that ID stuff is all built into it. Yeah. Next question.
Edwin R. Ruiz in Chicago writes in, I'm planning a website build out on WordPress and wanted to explore what AI options existed to help the process along. What tools and combinations have you found most helpful other than images?
We don't know. The person that asked about this is Ken Jordan, and we don't have him on. I think he's talked about it in the past, but he does a lot of website development. I know that people have talked on the show about doing this, and I don't know enough about it to answer that question. I just don't. I think that you'd have to wait until we have some web folks that are actually doing AI and web. I don't know that many people that are doing it yet, but we do think that it's a coming business. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes, in a Fast Company article talked about Anthropic's Claude 3 outperforming GPT-4 and Gemini Ultra in tests. Would any of you switch from ChatGPT Plus to Claude Pro as your day-to-day LLM? And he includes the link.
Yeah, I think the concern that I generally have that's been kind of underlined by J.J. McKenna is we just don't know how long the Google product will last. and so we just don't like when Google's doing this stuff, they're going to change the name again. They're going to do something else. And is that what, yeah, Gemini, as far as Gemini goes. And I mean, I think that right now, still early in the game, but ChatGPT 4 has a pretty big lead. So you kind of start looking at, there's going to be some version, there's going to be some place in here where people start to fall away. I don't think that it's there yet, but I think that ChatGPT has got a pretty big lead. So it's really hard for me to look at another solution right now that's going to compete with it. But we'll see. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida writes in, what do you say to people opposed to using generative AI? Don't humans operate in a similar fashion, recombining from acquired knowledge?
Courtney?
Yes. I think most of these questions have to do with, legal issues with copyright. And as we found out in the music world, that people can sue you over, the same 3 progressive notes in a song, regardless of whether the tune is like it or completely different. And there's only so many different combinations. And the same thing is true when you're training an LLM from existing stuff on the internet, whether you have licensed information or you just go out and harvest it from whatever you can get to on the internet with a subscription, whatever. But you're not licensing it necessarily for reproduction. So that has yet to be worked out in the courts, and they haven't decided yet whether it's a derivative or how it comes under the current Copyright Act of 1974 or whatever it was. That is yet to be decided. So there's, stay tuned. We'll see as some of these court cases resolve whether or not everything's going to have to change and suddenly comply with copyright and licensing issues to be included in the training for the LLMs and the artificially generated images.
It's going to be really interesting to see. I think there's still a lot of money that's sitting on the sidelines waiting to figure out how the courts are going to handle copyright. I do think that it's a pretty uphill battle to argue, as Andy underlines here, to argue that AI is really copying something as opposed to using it as part of its reference, which is what a human does. And I think it's going to be really hard to argue to a judge that it's going to do anything else. But it is going to matter what judges look at it or what juries look at it. It's definitely close enough to the center. And I know it's obvious to the people who are suing, but it's not to everybody else. And so it's close enough to the center where it's just going to really matter. It's going to be luck of the draw of who you end up with in the courts, who you end up with, and what their handfuls of opinions are probably going to make the decision. But I think that if I was going to lay odds, I'd probably lay odds that AI is going to, the ability to use AI is going to probably move forward. And I think that also from a public opinion, one of the reasons that I think that a lot of these are available to the public is specifically because, the courts say that they don't pay attention, but they are. And if a lot of people are using them for a lot of things, they're less likely to rule against it because of the disruption it'll create when they kill it. And once the courts have decided what that is, it's going to be pretty dramatic, like of how much money is spent on this project. Next question.
Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida writes in, is there a second hour scheduled, or there was a second hour scheduled for working with Blackmagic Cloud that got bumped, and he plans to put it back in the schedule?
That is a Sunday question. So ask that on Sunday. Thank you. Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman writes in, is there a way to monitor the heat and load on a Blackmagic design Decklink car?
To monitor the heat and the load on I think the Blackmagic cards are really designed to handle what they have coming in. I don't think that's the issue. I think you're looking at CPU and GPU draw on what's supporting them. And so I think that that's what you're probably looking for there. And so inside of that, just your, iStat menu is the one that I use to make that actually work. Next question.
John Preto in Las Vegas, Nevada writes in, what is the collective office hour mind saying about TikTok versus universal contracts?
Go ahead, Nigel.
I think it's just the start of a lot of battles, as we were just talking about. There's a lot of people positioning, getting things on the record, testing things in courts. I think it's hard to know where this is all going to end up. It's all going to either grind to a halt, or there's going to be, it's too hard to do. But until the attorneys have been paid their money, we're never going to know the answer. And we're going to see a lot of these individual battles happen as people position.
Yeah, it's a big fight, and the problem is that I think TikTok I think wanted to pay less, and Universal wants to get more, and TikTok doesn't really need the music industry anymore. Like it is, it's happy to have it, but it doesn't really need them. The music industry definitely needs TikTok. If you look at the number of artists that are freaking out over this, that are UMG artists, they don't. This is their entire promotion pipeline, and so I think TikTok understood that and just said, "Hey, this is the deal we're making," and they've taken all the UMG stuff off. It's going to be tight, and I think that UMG will either come back to the table or TikTok will keep on moving away from music as the basis of its content. Next week, later this week, tomorrow we'll be talking about the sound in the physical world. Thursday, audio clipping with AI, multi-streaming on Friday, and of course, 2 hours of Q&A on Saturday and Sunday. Sunday being the introspection. Welcome back to the second hour to talk about extractions. Now, I'm going to show you first how to do it in Photoshop without any tools at all, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we might want to approach these things in the future and some of the reasons that we might want to do that. So, one of the things we're talking about related to image extraction here is that we have a lot of great automatic tools. And they work fairly well. But we're going to kind of do a little bit of a, what was the thing where the guy went up against the locomotive? I can't think of his name.
David and Goliath?
No. The guy that was trying to beat the locomotive.
Promontory Point?
What?
Promontory Point?
No, never mind. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So
that was John Henry, I think.
John Henry, that was it. I should have thought of that before I actually tried to use it as a metaphor. So anyway, we'll look at some of the different approaches to this, and I'm going to take one image and do a couple different techniques on that image, and we'll see. Again, one's going to take more time, but the question is, are we getting a better result or a worse result or the same result with that? And so if you've got questions about some of these things, now there's a couple different things that we're going to talk about. Obviously, there's some the ability to adjust color is one thing that we may want to do, but the ability to select certain colors for those things, the ability to separate something from the background, and we'll talk about a couple different approaches to that. But one of the things I think that we need to remember is that there are some tools from the past that might be useful in the present. That when the automatic tool doesn't work, you may want to know that some of these exist, because I think a lot of people don't know that these exist anymore. Let me see if I can pull this up here real quick here. So we were talking about this before the show. So we have, it's an AI generated. So I was talking about why things like Mukana were created, and I needed an example of it. So what I did is I put in, this is a little bit of our AI moment for the show is I put into Mukana that I wanted, or into Midjourney, that I wanted an image of a know-it-all guy with glasses speaking into a mic. So, into a microphone. I think I told it an SM58. It did not make an SM58. It made something completely different. But here's what I ended up with. So this dude, this is the dude. This is why I try to keep mics out of the room. So it's someone like this who's going to be talking for 10 minutes and then not.
How many iterations of that did you do? Do you recall?
He's about. Yeah, we'll sidetrack because I think we're going to have time today. He maybe is 8 iterations in. Okay. Like it's not nothing. I mean, it's not like I produced hundreds of images to get to him. So there's. Let me see if I can. I might even have some other versions of it that I can show you of it, just because we are going to have, I think, a little time here. So let's see here. Let's grab these. So this was the one you saw there. I also have this guy who's got a little stubble too. I thought that the stubble was a nice touch. It doesn't handle facial hair very well though. It looks a little dense in there. This guy, because I asked for a coat and jacket, I think, on that one, and I ended up also with this guy. So they were all kind of in that realm. So those are some of the ones that I am. But those are all. But I think the generation of it was maybe 10 minutes, to figure out what I wanted there for that. So that's a whole nother subject matter. But anyway, but if that's also a when I do presentations, that's a kind of a insight into how I build presentations now. I don't use any I could never find stock art that did that. So anyway, so that that I can just go through a whole bunch of things that are all very similar and find the one I want. So anyway, so let's go back to our guy here. So the first thing that we will do is we'll select our guy, and up here you'll see the remove background. So this is the AI. Photoshop now has a remove background, which is actually very, very effective. Not 100% effective, but very effective. And we'll go ahead and give that a shot and see what happens. And so we hit remove background, and there he is. So overall, that has done a pretty good job. There's a couple things that when we look at it, and this is something that I could almost use to make this actually work. So, but there's a couple things that we start to look at here. It did a pretty good job of removing this area in his eyeglasses. It also did, if you look at, but there's little problems here, like here, right? Like where it grabbed onto it, just I don't know why it has this little section here. I don't know why it has this section here. I don't know. There's a little bit of white down here. So that is those are some of the things that we might want to try to take a look at and see if we can't make better. And we can use the tools that we have to improve those. And I'll show you a little bit. Now, there'd be a temptation to, for instance, go in and here, there'd be a temptation to go in here and just try to paint these out. That's what happens when you don't know how to use the tools. So what we'll do is let's turn this off here for a second so we can see what's going on. So we'll just disable this layer mask there so we can go back to what we're doing. So, some of the areas here, one of the things that if we go in and zoom in to this area here, move this up here like this. And so one of the things you start to get good at, and I'm not as good at as I used to be, is using paths, So what we'll do is I'm going to grab onto the pen tool. And this is something that is a, kind of a core skill. And I will admit that my skill set in this area with a trackpad, because I've almost never done paths with a trackpad, is very limited because you get kind of used to doing it in these areas. But what I'm doing here is I'm drawing a path that's going to allow me to, build it. Now, one of the big advantages of this, and I'm doing, I could probably do a little bit higher resolution path here, but it's going to give you a sense of what we need to do here, and especially in these little areas here. So I've done this down here, and now I might, for instance, want to make sure that I'm, kind of, going to grab here. And so you can see my last bit of my path here. And I'm going to grab onto my pen tool again. And I'm going to grab this, and you can see me kind of turn it with the curve. And this is where, you kind of grab onto these, and I'm going to, curve it. And this is this kind of, you can see me kind of tightening that up there by just moving those bars. And then I'm going to hold down my hand key or hold space bar. And then I'm going to grab on and get on the other end of this edge, and I'm going to, pull this in. And again, I'm not putting 1,000 points along there. I'm grabbing on, I'm kind of, grabbing onto areas like this. And this may seem like a lot of work, but the advantage of this is that I now have a path that describes this, this area. By holding down my, what is that? Command key. My hand knows what to do. My mind does not. I can move that in, go back to what I was doing, and I can, grab this and hold down the Option key so I can break that, and then go up here. And again, in here, I could do like a little bit of a drag and pull to get some of those edges in there. But you may do this, again, you're not going to, you might, a lot of these things are divide and conquer. Now I have this here, and I can hold down, again, this one needed to be pulled in a little bit, so I can grab this image and pull it in. And this is the advantage. I can sit here and just kind of noodle with these, and I'm not selecting or not selecting those paths. And so now I have this path, that's pretty well defined. And I can take this work path and double click on it and give it a, I think I can give it a name. Why is it not giving me a name? Oh, it gave me the save path on another screen. Hold on. There we go. So I can call this mic cable. And so I have this path here. And what I can drag this and turn this into a selection. So there's my selection for that. But when you're dealing with mechanical things, especially when they're kind of in a in a harder to grab onto, or where the tools may not be doing exactly what they want, and I can see that it might be going over here a little bit, so I can undo that. You can see this little edge here. I can hold down this key and pull this. Oops. Pull this down a little bit like that. Pull this up like that. And again, I can make these adjustments, but those are kept as an adjustment for that piece. So anyway, I pull that out. Now that's going to fix the problem that I saw there before. So this is just one way of doing selections, and I would highly recommend. And a lot of times you may do, understanding how to do this is pretty useful. And so even though, because again, this is where when the automatic breaks, you don't know what are you going to do next? And so here I might want to, for instance, build one, like it was having trouble with this little separation here in the automatic area. So if we go back to layers and I turn this, enable this mask back on, see how it has trouble. See, you can see where this is going to correct there. You can see a little white there. And again, you can go through here and just do it by, you could paint it out or whatever. But a lot of times if you build a mask, you're going to have more control over time to go back and fix those things. And so, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that, just disable that mask again. And you don't have to do the whole thing either. If there's a certain area that you want to treat, you can go, select here, and then we can select there, and then, and you'll notice that I am selecting on the other. I'm not putting my curves on. I'm not putting my points on the curve. I'm putting them on areas on either side of the curve, and then using my bars to grab around them. And again, this is kind of an old school tool that, man, do I not see, I barely see anybody ever use. And it is very useful, to have the skill. Now, I will admit, again, the problem you get into is if you haven't done, it is a little bit of work when you haven't done a lot of them, but you can see how I'm just kind of moving around this edge. Now, I could just decide, well, that's enough. That's all I need for this. And I can just go like this. Like, this is the part that I want to grab onto, or I could go the other direction where we'll just get rid of, we'll have this here, and I could decide that the section that I actually want to select to get rid of something later, let me pull this out, is actually that little in-between part that I didn't like. So I can just go over here like this, and then just select this little section here for correction. So now I can grab this. I'm going to grab this here. I'm going to go through here. And now what I'm doing is just selecting the area that was problematic. Again, you can try to do a bunch of layer masks or something else, but you may just find that being able to cut that out is what you want. And if I go back to paths, we'll see that is, I think I might have added that to my other section there. So I think what I needed to do was say I want a new path, but anyway, but that should be fine. Yeah, it's selected as another group in that area, but I want to do the same thing to them, so that's fine. So anyway, so using the path tool is something that is actually a pretty useful tool. We talked about it a little bit before as far as tracing logos and everything else. Another thing we can think about is also how do we use these tools to hold on one second. Sorry, little thing there. So what we want to look at here is how do we do this without the AI tools? Just so that we know that if the AI tools aren't going to work, they're going to be that we can actually get around it. So we'll go back to full size. Now the other thing that we can do here is, and the thing that really gets you is the hair, right? All this hair detail and everything else. And we'll do a little bit of I'm going to copy this layer here, And we're going to do a channel operation to see if we can't grab onto this here. So what we're going to do is go into our channels. And this is, again, one of the reasons when people say, why do you still use Photoshop? And a lot of times it's because of these channels that I need here. And so what I'll do is I'm going to copy this blue channel because it has the most difference between the background there. And then, oftentimes what we'll do is in this area, we can, the edges are what we're worried about. So to go back to those tools, let me back up a little bit here. Oh, and there's a new tool that does that. That is so annoying. Anyway, so there we go. So one of the things we may want to do when we select this character here is try to separate him out based on just the delta between that white area there. And so what we can do is say, I want to use the polygon tool. The first thing a lot of times we might do is use the polygon tool. And what we're doing is doing what we call a garbage matte. And so we just say, I'm only worried about the edges. So all of this doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna go up around like this. And this is probably not a big deal because that's pretty dark down there. It's these areas here that will get a little funky. And so we'll grab onto these. And again, you can see that there's a lot of work. And one of the things we're going to probably come back to of what I do, which is that because I have a lot of these tools, I will typically do a little bit of both. But we're going to show you how we would do it in the past. So that this is grabbing it here. I'm going to fill that with black, and that may not make any sense. But if I open up my levels and I grab onto this, a lot of times I can start to do things like bring this all down like this. And now I'm starting to kind of just build that mask there. And you can see that I've kept all the detail in his hair, by increasing the contrast there. Now, what I'll oftentimes do once you get to this level, you kind of get most of it kind of figured out there, and you're pushing it further away. Then what you can do is go in and grab your, this is your, close that. And I can grab my burn tool here. And in that burn tool, I can say, I want to only deal with the shadows. And I'm going to have and it's a light exposure. And what I'm going to do is the shadows means that it won't actually affect the thing. Now this is a way to kind of really go in there and try to find those things. Now I can make this a little bit, I can make it a little, we'll just to show you what we're doing here. And we probably would not do it with this character this way because it's, I would probably trace him because it's like as Pixar, there's so little data. I might use this for his hair, but outside of that, I would kind of grab onto it there. But you can see that I'm building his matte, for him. And you can see there's a little bit of area there I'm going to have to fix later. And I can go ahead and I can, again, because there's highlights there, I might select them. But I'm sitting here and just kind of building that matte from scratch. And again, using the alpha channel, I can build that out. Now, one of the advantages of that is that I can, one of the things we may want to try to keep is the shadow, and that's something we'll go back and take a look at in a second. But but you can see that we just kind of paint this out and start painting all the details, out of them here. And because we're in shadow only, it will just simply push it down, but not affect the white area behind it there. I think I may have grabbed onto more of than his shirt there. So anyway, so you start to see what that looks like. And you can see also that I've got a little bit of transparency there, and that's fine. I'm not going to fix everything here just yet. But what I am going to do is we'll take a look at like how his hair looks compared to the auto hair here. So I can invert this, and there's our alpha channel that has him there. I can drag this down and say, we'll make that a selection. And we'll see some things that aren't working, but it'll give you a sense of what we're doing here. And I'll go back to layers, and I'll go into this one and just I'll have this, do Command J, and that pulls him out of there. Now, again, there's some areas that I didn't work on yet, but I'm also going to do this where we turn that back on again. I'm going to turn this off for a second, turn this off for a second. So here's our edge. This is the one that I built, and I did it very, very quickly and obviously left some stuff out. I didn't quite grab onto everything there. But you also have a little bit of the, mine has a little bit of the shadow on the ground. I'm just going to grab this and move this oh my gosh. I have this love-hate relationship with this little bar that keeps showing up. Anyway. So I have more data down here that I can play with. Now, if we go back and look at the one that was created here, looks pretty close. You know, the only thing that he's missing is I might have to go back and use some of those channel operations to grab onto the shadows if I wanted them. The other thing is this errata that you saw here. So if I go into the paths to go back to what we were doing here and I drag this in and say, make this a selection, you can see that I've selected those two areas that were problems, and I can go into the layers and select this, and I'm going to hold down my option key and hit backspace, and that's going to fill with the foreground. And so now what I did is I simply updated the data that was used there. So there you can see that that's and again, this is how a lot of this stuff might come back together. So I've got that. I'm going to hit deselect here, and I am going to let's see here, hold this down, and now there's a couple different places here where you can see, like I can go into the channels again, and this is the mask that I'm dealing with. So if I look at this mask, this goes back to the same skills I had before, where I can grab onto this mask and I can actually use that tool. See the white areas here? And if I should be able to, now I'm going to turn this instead to highlights, and I'm going to start nudging that in. You see how as I use that tool that I was using before by hand, I can actually just reduce a little bit of the whiteness that was in that hair that picked up from that white to give it a little bit more transparency and kind of blend those areas in. So I'm using a little bit of both the AI as well as the tools that I just showed you to affect those things. And so, and then as we get so now we have our object here. So our guy. And I can save this out. Like for instance, I'll turn this path off here. Channels, sorry. So I have this guy over, and I do it over gray so that I could see what those things are because I'm putting it over something else there. Turn that off there. So now we have him here. And then I am going to, so now what I'm going to do is actually, here, I can show you here. I'm going to save him out as save this out as a ping file. And I don't know what's going to show up in my file thing, just projects and stuff like that. So just give me a second here. I've learned every time I do this, where I open up the file document or whatever, we have to edit it later because it shows some version of something that I'm not supposed to show. So anyway, I'm gonna save that out as a ping with transparency. That's all I'm doing is exporting that out, and I'm gonna save it out as a dude on mic, and then I'm gonna open up Keynote just to show you how I use this. Now I'll do this one over white, but we can play with it on something else as well. But let me grab this over here, cut back to here, and so now we'll insert an image. Actually, don't know how to insert an image this way, but choose. I see I did it. It's fine. All right. So there's my dude. So now he's in there with transparency. And the cool thing though is that if I go in here and I change, let's just change the theme. Just do blue. So you can see he might have a little bit of glow that I might have to work on a little bit, but overall I've got a pretty good, this might need to get clipped up a little bit. But now I've got a guy that's sitting, and I can move that around as far as making that actually work. And of course what I might do is make him smaller and give him let's see, we'll animate him in and say we're going to do a skid. There you go. So there's the you have to make that noise when you build any of these files here, as you just if you hit, this is not gonna, we'll just preview it again so you can see it, so Chris can see it, because he was looking down, he wasn't paying attention. Not that I'm bitter. But here you have the preview here. See, and then you have your dude, and that can be over top of any background. It can be over top of a photo. It can be over top of other things like that. But what you want to look at is the skills that I used. I used AI to make some of that work. B, I used the path tool to grab onto mechanical things that don't have a lot of fine detail. And then finally, I used some of the channel manipulation to actually tie that back together. So those are different things that I use to kind of pull all those things together there. So go ahead, Chris.
So I've heard you say the divide and conquer a lot. So the trick is you use the auto thing.
Here, give me 1 second, Chris. Just talk amongst yourself for a second.
Sure. So what I was going to say is and I'm actually kind of asking a question, but that's okay. I'm going to work this out amongst myself here. So in the divide and conquer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the various tools and I have to gang them together into a single alpha. Do you ever have trouble where you're ganging them together and you get like
you get little
residual buildup and
you get, and so what you really have to do there is when you are the residual buildup there is you're going to have to go through. You combine them all, like, because you're gonna and then you're gonna go through, and then there is sometimes a little bit of paint fix that just gets done. You just like a little bit of here, a little bit of edges. It's not what usually happens is that you have little gaps, where it's not where it's putting those together, and so those are the things that you want to kind of take into account there. But again, the thing that is really important to hopefully walk away with here is that the big thing that you want to make sure of is that understanding how to use path tools, understand how to use channel operations along with the generative AI stuff. Because like when I punch these out, when I'm doing them and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to use that image, like if I don't know if I'm going to use the image, I don't put any work into it. I bring it into Photoshop. I say, remove the background, and I put it into Keynote, and then once I've used it in the presentation for a little while, I'm like, okay. Yeah, like I think I'm going to actually use this image, and then I'll go through and I'll clean it all up to make it look good. But I don't.
That's one of the benefits of. You said you do most of your backgrounds in white. Doesn't matter. It's fine. It's going to be okay.
The hardest part with white is exactly, if you look at this here, it's the little glow behind him. And so that's the part that if you're putting it over a pure background now. This will be enough. I'm going to probably put him over a photograph, and then you won't notice it at all. But if you're putting him over if you're putting an object over a dark background, it is so that over white. That is one of the reasons that I used white. One of the two big reasons in Keynote that I used white for a very long time was, number one, is that printing them. There was a lot of clients that would print them. We talked about this earlier. We had clients that would print our decks, and if you put color in the background, it came out like wet out of the printer. Like it just come out wet out of the printer, because you're using up so much ink every single time you do those prints, and it also didn't look very good. And so that was the first reason that we went to white. And the second reason we went to white is because once I got to white because of that reason, I got really hooked on the idea that I could just do things over white, and you can search for things in Google over white and very quickly just use, a remove background inside of Keynote, which is not as good as the AI inside of Photoshop, which is why I still go to Photoshop.
I thought what was interesting about the remove background is how poorly it did on his mic stand. Did you notice how bad the mic stand was?
Generally, AI doesn't do well on things that are mechanical. Like in general, they just, because it's pulling all these pixels together, it actually does a better job on organic things than it does on mechanical things. And so, but it does the same thing when it comes to, separating those things out as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to play with the AI selection tools in Photoshop yet, but in the old color selection tool where you could set it on contiguous or non-contiguous, so it would select all the colors in the image. With the AI selection, can you set it on, if you have like those little areas that you said, like on the mic stand where it didn't select it, can you hold down the shift key and using AI selection, select those little white areas to go ahead and add those to the selection, or like you used to be able to with color selection?
I don't know. Hold on. Let's see here. And of course, I just added that one. Let's start at the again. Let's start at the beginning again. Let's see here. Hold on.
So where it makes mistakes, can you say, just look at this area where I'm clicking right now and add that to the selection?
Well, let's try. Hold on a second here. So let's cut to this, and let's say we'll remove the background here. Use great fringe in the mask. Yeah. So what I do find interesting about this is that, and I'll turn this gray background so we can see it again, is that it makes the same mistakes. I don't even know if I don't even know if it's using AI, only because it's making the same mistakes over and over again. Now it says,
yeah, so there's no
here.
randomization in its selection.
Let's
It's
see what
AI
happens
selection.
here. Let's see if it. Oh, that's add. Oh, this is just paint fix. Oof. Let's see here. So this is just like a draw a circle, and oh, this is just a paint fix, which is not not useful. All right, so let's see here. I don't know of any. And you're just saying to try to select it and let's see here. Let's try this. Let's do this.
Yeah, you know where you used to like select a color and then say constrain, so it'd take all the area, let's say below his arm and foot where it touches, and then you want to click on an area that's contained elsewhere and hold down the shift key and would add it to that selection, would add to the selection.
I told it to remove the white, and it just went for it. It just, as far as generative AI, it just grabbed onto all of it and put something.
It got the cord.
I'm going to put something else
in.
So I was just curious if that would work.
Yeah,
I don't know how to refine that. And Adrian, by the way, says to use the layer matting to remove and minimize the gray fringing. Yeah, and you can do some of that. It's oftentimes hard to get rid of all of it that way. But the
and if you did a black background instead of a white background, wouldn't then
here's the funny thing.
When you put it over a complex background, it look more like a drop shadow than a halo. So
the problem with the black background is that the Midjourney treats it oh, you want to do something completely different. You want to make it look dark. You want to make it look moody, and so you don't get a person. It doesn't really know what it's doing. But if you ask Midjourney to do it over a dark background, it creates a dark image, like a darkish.
So it's kind of treating the background as an ambient light source. Then
no, it's treating it like a mood. So when you put it over a black background,
say black limbo.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. We could try it. I mean, we can show you what I can't open up.
Can you ask it to create an image over a transparent background?
No, it doesn't do that yet.
With alpha,
we think that is somewhere, in some plan. there's a version of this that's going to do that, but they haven't generated alpha.
Do you ask every time there's a new Midjourney? Do you test something? Please generate a basketball with alpha.
I thought about it I've asked for it side by side with alpha, and I can't get it to work, because it would be really interesting if it gave me, as people showed it, like that would work, and I think it was just clickbait, because it was because I asked for doing it side by side, and it just created garbage like cook. It was not.
Speaking of alpha, I did post to Apple for them to fix Keynote.
I think we should just send something every day that just says, "Please fix Keynote." Like, don't give them any ideas. Just
no, that'll just get you blacklisted.
Over. Let's see here. Black limbo. All right. While we're talking, I have Midjourney
working for you.
Little digital elves are with their little paintbrushes are brushing away right now. Let's go to the first question.
All right. First question comes in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. And he says, do you ever feather a selection to soften the edges?
I don't generally feather the selection overall to do that, to soften the edges. I find that it is there's parts that I want it to be sharp and parts that I don't want it to be sharp. So I'll feather the brush that I'm using to make those controls, or I'll feather the selection that I'm doing to make that, but I won't feather the whole selection to do that. Occasionally, if I want to pull everything in, you can do expand and contract, but what I'll tend to do that softly, if I want to just pull in a little bit like a logo and I don't have time to fix it or trace it, I might blur it a little bit. And this is, and then what I'll do is I'll blur it, the matte just a little. And then I will use my levels to increase or decrease the contrast. And then that'll push that edge back and forth, because you've now created kind of a ramp that you can push up and back, in that area. And sometimes when we do it, oftentimes I'll scale it way up. So I'll take a logo and I'll scale it up to like 6,000 by 6,000 or 12,000 by 12,000, blur it a little bit, affect those edges, and then scale it back down. And the bicubic, so like, I'm sorry, I got the results back. Hold on a second. Oh, let's see here.
Not black limbo.
No, but it's a good example of what I've been talking about.
It didn't draw. No, I won't say it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Hold on.
Today in Midjourney.
This is brought to you by Dark. So this is what I'm talking about when it comes to like what you say. Like, I got one that was right. Maybe if I kept on working on it. But, the other ones were almost all someone talking over white, and it all made sense. But when I said dark, I got that. So, like, it's just like, it's dark. Like, again,
dark is a subject matter.
Yeah, dark is a subject matter. So it's, this one.
Did you say a dark background, or?
I said dark about black limbo. And so it went.
So number 2 is not bad.
Number 2 is not bad. It's close. This one is like, I think he's a zombie. Like, he's in the middle of
angry.
his like transition to zombie.
He looks like one of those people at a school board meeting.
This guy is yelling into a light. And this one has a cord going, I think, around
looks
his
a little
neck.
bit like Adam Savage in number 3.
Cord around his neck.
Look, it's like the cord splits here.
What he's currently yelling
one
is,
goes
take
down
this cord
here,
around
and then the other one, and there's a cord that goes up here. So it just kind of flipped out. So it's hallucinating. But this is, if you're asking, why don't you use black as the background? That's why. Anything other than white, for whatever reason, white works in there. I know that we digress, but I think that's why I go down that path. Let's go to the next question.
Next question comes in from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana, and he says, I love the Instant Alpha tool, but won't AI enhanced apps eventually learn how I want to clean up the edges after I apply Instant Alpha? Is there a reason I should manually select edges to start rather than use Instant Alpha?
No, what I hope to do was to show that there are reasons to know what those skills are. So it's the skills that I showed you. There are reasons to know what they are and know how to use them and know that they exist, so that when the Insta Alpha doesn't work, like I cook a lot of food from scratch. You can buy it in a box. Like, you can definitely buy it in a box and throw it in the microwave, and you'll get some food out. But it's nice to have the skill that I could actually grab a bunch of raw ingredients and turn it into food. And so I think that's in the same way, having these basic skills is useful, and you want to at least know that they're there. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Roscoe, what I would say is, what you're talking about is a day, and that day is someday in the future. And until then, we have Photoshop.
Right.
I think it will get better, but there will be a whole generation. There'll be a whole generation. Let's face it. If you explain channel ops to most people under, like, I don't know, 45, they think you're crazy. If you took a kid today and showed them how hard it was to do text in Photoshop, 25, 30 years ago, they think it's nuts. And it was nuts, but it got better. And so holding on to knowing these additional skills just gives you the ability to fix things. There will be a day when Midjourney will, create perfect alpha channels. It's just not today.
Right. And it may not be
yet.
for a while. The last 10% or the last 1% takes a long time. Like it's always in rotoscoping or anything else, or match moving or tracking or motion capture. I mean, if you think about how hard it is to get this right, just look at Princess Leia in Rogue One. Is that they had all the money, and that last is a weird last 0.5% that still bothers us. And
what was wrong with it? I don't know this controversy.
With both, it just doesn't look like real. It doesn't look real. Like you look at it and you go, I can't quite put my finger on it, but something's wrong. And it's just, it's a couple seconds of her talking, and at the very end of Rogue One, there's, she was no longer young, and I think that she might have passed by then. So I think that when they did that, and so they had a young Princess Leia, and you're just kind of like, it didn't. It was so close. It was so close to being right, but it wasn't quite right, and you could tell. And the only reason I bring that up is that with all of these things, it's that last weird, like organic last couple percentage points that are really hard to get a hold of, and you might have to put your hand into it.
So when you said Rogue One, I was thinking of Episode 1. I was like, Princess Leia. I don't think she was.
She had a huge role in Episode 1.
I don't think she was even in that movie.
She wasn't born yet.
What are you talking about?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I wonder with Sora being developed doing video work, I was wondering and it does a pretty good job of maintaining, because if you look at their examples and read the white paper on it, it can separate a foreground object or even an object that's in the middle of the background from the rest of the background and substitute another object for it. So is it creating layers to track those images?
Well, it's not separating it; it's generating it.
It is generating it, but you can tell it to keep the same action on the background, but turn the car into a butterfly.
Yeah, I don't think
it will repeat
but it's thinking about it as different layers. So it's just it's just adding the layers on top. So it's not, it's layering that so that it knows where the subject layer is. It doesn't have to separate it out. Separating things out is hard. Mm-hmm. Creating layers is easier,
Or does it keep it just as an object, basically, and render it on an object basis?
Well, it's an object on a layer
in 3D space.
When it renders
it's
it
an
out,
object in 3D
it.
space.
Yeah.
Because it also has to take into account the lighting, because it does, it lights the object as if it were in that particular environment. So if there's shadows, that blends the shadow onto the object that it's putting in on that layer. So it's amazingly complex. I thought maybe they could just add that technique into the still image.
Yeah, the hard part is that right now I'm not clear that like Midjourney knows what's in the foreground and the background. Like the way it creates those images, it's not really conscious to. It's not thinking as objects. It's kind of like when you think about Gaussian splats.
Labels and what has been labeled as that, as bringing those pixels in from things that are labeled that.
So it's a very odd way of pulling it together, but it doesn't really have a concept of foreground and background right now. Mm-hmm. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, could these same techniques be used with Pixelmator?
Chris?
Maybe some of them. I think it would be super interesting, Alex. And I realize that neither company would want to do it, but I think we could develop the environment where we could get away with it in a friendly fashion. Invite somebody from Pixelmator, invite somebody from Adobe, and say, we want you to both show off your tools. We're going to have a series of things we'd like you to both do. We would like Pixelmator to bring something that you can do really well that you happen to know Photoshop doesn't do well, and Adobe will probably also bring something that they could do exceptionally well that they think you can't do. It'll be a friendly jab session, but we just want to compare these two tools side by side. I think we have a forum where we could get away with doing that.
I think what Pixelmator brings mostly, there's two things in my opinion that Pixelmator brings. One is cost. It's much less expensive than Photoshop. And 2 is speed. So because it's using the way it uses GPUs and the way it manages that process, it's a lot of its base operations are a lot faster than Photoshop. So you can see things in real time that you would wait in Photoshop for. So, and Photoshop slowly is kind of working through that. There aren't that many other, Affinity. I use Affinity Photo for a variety of reasons. One is like it has a 3D space. This gets into what Chris was talking about. It has a 3D sphere that I can put spherical pictures that have my tripod in them. I can put it in there and roll it up and paint that tripod out while it's in the spherical space, which means that a lot less pixels have to be manipulated. And then I can unwrap it again, and it does it in a lossless way. So that's why I started using Affinity Photo instead of Pixelmator, was specifically for that one tool. And also Pixelmator or Affinity, and I don't know if Pixelmator does it now, but I know that Affinity Photo exports TGAs that I can use in TGA outputs with alpha channels properly so that I can use them in my ATEM switcher. And that may or may not have been suggested by me. So then I was like, and we have a winner. And I use Affinity Photo for that. And Pixelmator didn't, at the time I asked, maybe they do it now, but at the time I asked, they didn't understand why I wasn't using pings. That's what I got. That's the response I got. And so Affinity, I had an update in like a couple weeks. And so then I stopped paying attention to Pixelmator. so that was years ago, because I was like, I really need to be able to make TGAs that are not in, because we were basically trying to figure out what we put on our computers that isn't Photoshop. We'd have a handful of Photoshop licenses, but I didn't want 20, and so we had to decide what we're putting on the computers. Next question.
Another question from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. He says, do you try to avoid contrasting colors at the edges, say blue hair on an orange background, to try and hide any imperfections in the edge selection?
Yeah, I mean, in general, you want to get to a point where you're building the alpha channel so that they look good on anything. Like if you're really going to use this, like if I decided that guy is something I want to use all the time, which probably isn't for a variety of reasons, but if I decided I wanted to do that, then I would go in and try to make sure that the alpha channel looks good in front of anything. In fact, what I would do is put different backgrounds behind it and move him from one to the next to make sure that it's working. And there a lot more work. And again, that's where you're going to start going in and using those channel operations. And by the way, that's one of the reasons that I showed this in Photoshop, is that there aren't channel operations available in Pixelmator, or there's Path Tool definitely is available, but there's not channel operations in Pixelmator or Affinity Photo, which has been a huge problem. There's the reason that I still own Photoshop is now it's the AI tools as well as the ability to do, it was channel operations for a decade, was just the only thing I needed out of Photoshop that I didn't have on the other apps. And then it became that AI tool that removed the background, but also, fill this in with this, or add this over here, or do this, or put this things. I use that. That's probably the number one use I have of Photoshop. I'll open something up and have it remove something, put something in, change something, adjust something, and I do it all the time.
I think about it all the time. If I retired and I was just doing what I do for fun, would I cancel my Adobe subscription?
I thought about that, but at this point, I will say that until the other tools have AI, the ability to do the AI fill, the infills the way Photoshop is, I'll hang on to Photoshop. Like that was a pretty genius ad that they added to Photoshop. Was the generative fill is so useful that just by itself it's worth it. For me to keep Photoshop, in that area. But I try to use the other ones, and again, I use Affinity for probably 60-70% because I'm always trying to figure out, do I really need Photoshop? But right now, with generative fill and with the channel operations, I still need Photoshop. So that's where I'm at right now. Next question.
Next one comes in from Adrian Watkins in Wellington, New Zealand. He says, how do you feel Tracejourney compares to Photoshop in AI background removal?
So Tracejourney will take your photos and convert them to a line art, so it'll convert it actually to an EPS file or an SVG file, I believe. And I haven't used it for a little while, because it simplifies the image. And so if you want it to look very much like line art, you can simplify the image that way. The advantage that it has is that it'll simplify the image a little bit, but then it's definitely got a perfect alpha channel. So to what Adrian's talking about, like I don't know if I could do it that quickly, but let me see while we're talking here. Oh my gosh, hold on. this iPad. I cannot get the iPad to not show up from this one computer. Like, it makes me crazy. Anyway, let me see if I pull up Tracejourney again. I'm sorry, I can't show this.
Tracejourney is an iPad app.
Tracejourney is a bot in it is a bot in Discord, kind of like Midjourney, except what it does is you put an image, you put it up an image for Tracejourney, and it will. And I haven't used it for quite some time, just because it was. I actually don't know. I don't know why I stopped using it. So hold on, let me see if I can. Let's grab the same guy, and but it's been a moment since I used it. I was using it for some logo stuff, and it did a pretty good job. But I think some of the logos I was trying to get it to do were. Let's see. I'm going to vectorize it. Let's see. And starting the process here. Just give me a second. Anyway, so we'll see what that looks like. We'll vectorize it. I guess it does have a remove background as well. Let me try to, let me drag the same guy in and see if we can just tell it to, let's see. So both the trace journeys are working right now. No, they're working away here. So, yeah. Let's see, is that the... I'm trying to figure out. Unfortunately, I did two of them at the same time. There we go. So let me download the SVG. So it's interesting. I mean, there's something about the trace journey that I think... here, I'll open it up and show it to you here. Sorry, I'm just trying to find something I can put it in. It's because it's an SVG. Hold on. So we'll grab onto SVG. Now I didn't remove the background. I didn't ask it to move the background, so I'd probably have to go into the SVG and do some work. But what you can see here is, if you look at the two of them here, the SVG, because it's using line art at that point, it's kind of doing this kind of, it's not a smooth, so it has this kind of cartoony look to it with a little bit of a cartoony, and if I remove the background, I think first I probably would have gotten if I put the one in with an alpha channel, I probably get something that, let me try this, hold on. Let's see what I do with the alpha channel here, what it does. I will say that let's see, vectorize that. Let me grab the ping that it created.
I think the short answer is, if you have to vectorize it, you're never going to get organic, feathered hair in a vector image. So
here's this is what it pulled. So I would say that the Photoshop alpha, this is what Tracejourney pulled as just a remove the background, which I definitely think is not as good as the Photoshop one. This Photoshop one I did a little work to, but still it's dramatically better than the Tracejourney one or Tracejourney bot. So I would say that Photoshop is doing a better job. And now what I'm going to do is download this guy with a dude on a mic. Let's see here. And I'll pull in the one that I created that started with an alpha channel and see what we get here. Let's see here. So here's the dude. Here's that same dude. And you can see how it even started to do some funky stuff with the back of his hair. So I would say that, and again, you may want to have something that's even more cartoony. So that may be the look that you're trying to create, so it's not, that there's a look there that could want to happen. So yeah, but the advantage of the Tracejourney stuff is that it is, when I just convert it to SVG, it's now line art. You could go in and do more editing and other things like that.
So this is an age-old thing. We've talked about it many times, that depending on your resolution of, your target, your desired outcome, it may be super easy to do it.
Right.
And it may be really difficult. I told the story the other day about playing darts with my family. We can't even hit the dartboard.
Right.
Right. We celebrate. It's like, oh, I hit the dartboard. And yet there's people that are trying to hit the dot in the middle.
Well,
so
the same thing, and that happens anywhere. Like my father, he has a near photographic memory, and when we play Trivial Pursuit with my father, he has to answer all the questions on the card every time he play every step. Otherwise, he'll win in one try. Like like literally, he'll get every answer correct, and the only chance we have is to try to stump him, and he still wins every game. Like it's not any fun to play with him, So he'll still win every game. He just won't win in one turn, and that's what we try to hold him back. So anyway, so everybody has what they're, there are in any game or anything that you're working on, what do you need, and what is the level of skill that the person has to make those things happen. And again, when I create something like, hey, I want to throw this in my presentation while I'm working on my presentation, I take it into Photoshop. I say, remove the background. I export it out, and I put it into my presentation. I don't do any more work to it. In fact, the first time I do it, I throw it in and let Keynote just remove the background. The first time I use this dude, let Keynote remove the background. Then I go, I'm going to have Photoshop do it because I might use it a couple more times. And then at some point, before I show it to someone important, I might, do some work on it. But I don't. But one of the keys is to also be judicious about where you put effort. Like I'm super stingy about time. So I'm always like, I'm not going to put effort into things until I think it's going to go somewhere. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, is it worth it to upgrade to Adobe Photoshop from Pixelmator because of its generative tools?
For me, it is. I will say that the generative tools are really powerful. And if you're not getting paid for it, then you got to decide whether it's worth it or not. But I think that there's usually some kind of sale that, for whatever reason, I'm paying $9.95 a month for Photoshop. I don't know what deal I got or how I got set up in that, but there was something like, you can sign up for $9.95, and I did. And so that's what I'm paying for it. So it's a pretty inexpensive thing for me for how much I use it. Next question.
Next question comes in from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Discontinuity in depth, discontinuity in surface orientation, change in material properties, variation in scene illumination. Which detection method, if you were setting up lighting a shot that will need to be layered?
If you know that if you're setting up a shot that needs to be layered, you really need to have a strong contrast between the subject and the background. I mean, it's just, that's the, if you're trying to layer something out there, but the main thing is that also, if you were doing it for production, a lot of times rotoscoping has gotten so good that if you are relatively good at it, if you need it for production, you just send it out for roto. And we'll talk about roto in the future. And what you saw me do with the line there is a little bit of roto, but there's so many good roto, and the cost of roto has dropped dramatically. It doesn't, we don't do rotoscoping in the United States anymore. like that's not a thing. It was a kind of an experiment by visual effects companies the little thing, but it was an experiment by visual effects companies to increase their margins. But what it ended up happening is that all the work went to the Philippines and to India, and it basically took that market away from the United States. And I don't think that and at first it was less expensive, and now it's just better. Like, the operators that do the cleanup I know that, there's a lot of those kinds of things that we see that the operators are doing the cleanup are just so good at it because they do so much of it, and it's just, it's just a skill set that we don't have anymore. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and they were doing a lot of this when everything was doing 3D conversion, when they were taking flat films and converting them to 3D. So layering it to do that.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about that with manufacturing and other things. Just same thing. The skill sets are now somewhere else. Like, and they are so deep. And it takes, the thing is, to be a good rotoscoper is definitely like a 10,000 hour problem. And so, the thing is that if you have a huge group of people that are doing all of that somewhere else, that culture, you need a lot of people around. You need a lot to learn from people. You need to, there's a lot that gets done there. So yeah, but you can send it out. The good news is that it's relatively inexpensive to have. Like, I've had to do fixes where, we had to fix the wall, or we had to fix something else. We had to paint something out. And I send it out, and for not very much money, it comes back and it's all ready to go and it looks perfect. And I could never do that by my hand. I can have it done in hours. And it's done better than anything I could do. So it's pretty amazing. Well, there you go. We were able to, took something that I almost canceled because I wasn't ready. I was like, I don't know. I've got a couple images. I had dreams of doing something bigger and everything else. And I was like, we'll see how long this lasts. And the great conversation from the panelists, can't do this without you. Great conversation with the producers, can't do this without you. So we really appreciate everybody's contribution here, and incredible work by the team on the back end, trying to keep up with this mess and trying to make sure that we're bouncing around. And every once in a while you see us, struggle with a question in the first hour. And that just is a pointer to how complex this system is and how many people it takes to make this all work. And they just do such a great job, and we very rarely see anything that even is a distraction. And it's because they are, just an incredible team on the back end that's managing these projects, making sure that we have, getting people ready to be in the second hours, getting, processing this, building the tools, doing, and cutting the shows every single day, 7 days a week. Really, really great work. We traveled 44,000 miles today, 71,000 kilometers, and that is 349 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
It's a lot of potassium.
So much potassium.
It's all the potassium.
No, they're
I
adding.
don't know if it's all, but it's a lot.
They're adding AI Co-Creator to Microsoft Paint. Of all things.
There you go.
Yeah,
I'm
generative
really looking
AI
forward
in
to
Paint, and
the
now they're
AI
adding
3D
layers
tools
on the next one.
that are in testing right now are pretty cool. I can't wait to show those. It's like, give me a house, give me this, and it's like, and it's in 3D.
I figured out why I couldn't share my notes. I was creating notes that were native to the phone and not iCloud notes.
Oh, I don't do that.
Clearly.
Yeah. That would be
That's why I was having the trouble and you weren't.
The biggest reason I use notes so that I can use them on everything. So excellent. All right. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.